Hello, friends and neighbors. This is Doug Taylor with the Olympic Climate Report, broadcasting from the lovely little community of Sequim on the historical lands of the Skalalam people. Today, we're reporting live from the very gates of Mordor, where we're investigating reports that a whole new round of lies is about to issue forth from the foul mouth of Sauron. Oh, we've heard these lies before. Well, remember, it was decades ago. Climate change, it's a myth. They're making it up. Pointy-headed liberal scientists are using their scientific positions to float a story so that people will accept socialism. You don't want socialism. It's all made up. But it kept getting warmer, and after a while they had to change the story a bit. See, climate change, they began to tell us, is a natural phenomenon. In fact, global warming has occurred before. It'll be warmer for a few years, and it'll cool off. It's a cycle. Don't worry about it. Why, by the end of the first decade of the new century, it'll be cooling off again. But it didn't cool off again. And so a new round of propaganda had to come issuing out of the dark tower. And what was the new message? Why, climate warming is a good thing. We've deliberately warmed the climate a bit so that you can go swimming at the beach for another week or two at the end of the summer. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Even after school starts, you'll be able to go down to the beach on the weekend and enjoy it because of what we've done for you. Aren't you looking forward to the robins of spring arriving earlier every year? We've done this for you. And if they drop dead on your doorstep, who cares? But now, it's a whole new brand of propaganda. Propaganda designed to freeze our blood. And even now, to lead to inaction, to lead to terror. And what is the new big lie? You're doomed. You've waited too long, you fools. You should have done something about this before. Now, because you hesitated to do anything about it, it's far too late. The world's coming to an end. Tell your children to have no children. Fire up the Hummer and go camping. Let's start a forest fire. It might be exciting. That's all right. That's the new message. Give up. There is no hope. That's their message. That is the message of the Dark Tower. Don't even try. It's too late. We stalled you long enough. But wait. I think I hear the gates opening. And I better get out of here while I have the chance. I'm going while the going's good. I'll see you back at the studio. That was terrifying. That was scary. Those gates of Mordor, the foul stench, the smokes, the black sludge on the ground. But I had to go there. I had to go there. Because the more we know about their massive covert disinformation operation, the better we'll be able to resist their messages of distraction and despair. Because, like propaganda does, they aim to use our feelings to drive us. Our fear, our legitimate fear, which alerts us to the danger we face, and which we can then let go of. As Frank Herbert said in his litany on fear, let it pass through me. And then know what to do next. They hit the button again, and they hit the button again, and they hit the button again until we're terrified. And then they keep hitting it even harder until we're in despair. It's doom, it's the end, give up. And then we give up, and they've reached their goal. Our anger, which could activate us to the dangers we face, and which could be directed against what they're doing to us. They misdirect. They direct our anger against other victims. Poor immigrants rushing north. Why are they rushing north? Well, let's see. The rain stopped falling. The crops perished. The livestock died. The well is empty. We have to go. And we're supposed to be angry with them instead of the people who are causing that? And our grief, the worst of all, our griefs. Grief which can heal. Grief which can give us strength to carry on, to protect what we can protect, to save what can be saved. They denigrate, they devalue, they discount. We're the ones with some emotional problem. We're tree huggers. Oh, we're in love with insects. And we can't complete our grief. And we fall into inaction and despair. And they reach their goal again. We'll be joining with Jennifer Atkinson, who gave her presentation at the Washington Climate Assembly on eco-anxiety and climate grief, and how these feelings impact us in ways that can work against us, that can depotentiate us, that can leave us unable to fight for a better future. And she talks a bit about how we can change the story we tell ourselves in order to change how we respond. Because if I'm the hero in my story, it's very different than if I'm just the victim. But before we go to Jennifer, there is something I've overlooked. Reminded my oldest girl, Robin, in a telephone conversation yesterday evening. What motivates us? Surely our fear alerts us, and our anger could activate us, and our grief can give us strength. But what can motivate us? To begin to address that question, let us kneel at the feet of our indigenous brothers and sisters who kept this continent in trust, in perpetuity, for their descendants for 1,000 years of generations. Maybe they can help us. What motivated them? To begin answering that question, I'd like to listen to Leonard Forsman. He's chairman of the Suquamish Tribal Council and president of the Association of Northwest Indian Tribes. And he gave the keynote speech at the Climate Assembly. Let's hear what Chairman Forsman has to say. Chairman?
Leonard Forsman has served as tribal chairman of the Suquamish tribe since 2005, and he is in his first term as president of the affiliated tribes of the Northwest Indians. Chairman.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you everybody for participating in this event. It's a great honor to be asked to be here to kick this off, and I have high hopes for a lot of great ideas and concepts and pathways that will be developed through this process to help us address climate change, this climate crisis. And want to talk a little bit about our duty and accountability as people of Washington and First People of Washington as well. So Chief Seattle, who I mentioned before, gave a speech just before he signed a treaty. And part of that speech says that every part of the soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some or sad or happy event, and the day is long vanished. between. I believe this is a sustainable solution, but it just seems to me the dialogue has gotten so polarized that anybody who acknowledges climate change is saying we're going to lose jobs, and anybody who is all pro-economy is a climate change denier. That's not true. I don't think that's the case, but we need to find more common ground. And I think there is plenty of common ground that we can achieve. Consider your ancestors, future generations, and other species as we go through this and what your role in that will be. And just like to end with a little message here on the last slide, please, about being an ancestor and how you can be the ancestor future generations will respect and hold in gratitude. And my last message would please everybody during this process have an open mind and also be bold and creative. So on behalf of the Suquamish tribe and the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to open up this great concept. And I really appreciate all the organizers for putting this together and all the folks that have volunteered to be part of this process. Thank you. Aishka.
Chairman Leonard Forsman, chairman of the Suquamish Tribal Council at the Washington State Climate Assembly. I commend you to his full remarks at the YouTube channel for the Washington Climate Assembly at their inaugural meeting. He had much to say about the history of his people on the land, how they related to the land, and how they related to one another. Two things he mentioned that I felt particularly attached to our episode today. The first was his quote from Chief Seattle. "Every part of this soil," he says, "is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished." When my Kathy and I first came to the great Pacific Northwest, it wasn't long before our children followed, and they brought the grandkids with. And you know what? I can't walk along the shore of the Kotite Pond without seeing those little ones running ahead of me in their little pinafores, their shadows cast long behind them. In that long ago, once upon a day. Or the time we went to Discovery Bay and had burgers at Fat Smitty's that were bigger than them. And we went to the ice cream parlor in the old train there that was there at the time, and had our ice cream cones and went for a walk along the Discovery Bay Trail, and the precious memories of loving family. There's a motivator. At the end, Chairman Forsman talked about what kind of ancestor do you want to be. His people think of themselves as descendants and ancestors, and they looked back on their ancestors with pride and gratitude, and they lived their life so that their descendants could look back on their ancestor with pride and gratitude. What kind of ancestors will we be? Can we be the ancestors who threw down our sword before the battle began and ran? Or cowered somewhere, unable to face our fear, unable to move forward? Our grief can steel us to the battles ahead. But only love can really motivate us. At least that's what I took out of Chairman Forsman's words. Go and watch them yourself, see what you think. I believe now we are at that place where we can move forward and listen to Jennifer Atkinson's talk on eco-anxiety and climate grief, with a little something under our belts to steel us. Jennifer Atkinson.
A quick introduction, Jennifer. Jennifer Atkinson is an associate professor of environmental humanities at the University of Washington in Bothell. Thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer, and welcome.
Thank you so much. So I was invited today to talk about climate anxiety and eco grief, the sense of doom and despair that's really been growing as we face these alarming projections about our future. So I think this is less directly about policy and more about the existential dimensions, but I think that they very much inform each other. We really, usually focus on the physical aspects of the climate crisis, but of course, this issue is also taking a huge emotional and psychological toll. And I first got involved in this topic after seeing my students at the University of Washington fall into despair. On this slide are some quotes from the first day of one of my classes when I asked them how they felt about the future. And these are young people telling me that they don't want to have children because the future seems so grim, or they have trouble sleeping at night because their minds are playing out scenes of social breakdown and mass extinction. So what is climate or eco-anxiety? These terms are used for an array of emotions, so it's important not to define them too narrowly. The APA defines eco-anxiety as a chronic fear of environmental doom, and they profile a range of symptoms. But eco-anxiety really, it's taken off in such a way that it's become a catch-all term for a range of emotions, not just anxiety, but grief, shame, anger, fear, hopelessness. I think I really like this definition. This is from Britt Ray. She looked at the APA's official definition and then just summarized it in these words. She said, at this late stage in the climate crisis, it is merely a sign of attachment to the world. And then finally, the general public is also reporting increasing levels of distress around climate change. And that's because everybody's daily life is changing in 1,000 subtle ways. And here I'm talking about the more slow moving changes like the loss of bees and songbirds, those annual fishing trips where you come back with less and less every year, or the number of days you can't go outside or see the stars because of the wildfire smoke. Many people who work on climate issues, myself included, will tell you that just a decade ago, it felt like very few people were paying attention. The news was ignoring the issue, and much of our energy was just going towards convincing people that climate change was real. And then things shifted very quickly, with public belief in climate change increasing alongside media coverage in just the last few years, but with a very strong emphasis now on apocalyptic outcomes. And we have all seen these headlines saying we're screwed, it's game over for the planet, decarbonize in 10 years or face the total collapse of civilization. I want to say that headlines like these are dangerous because many people assume it's already too late and there's nothing we can do, which is not true. We need to completely reframe the way we think about grief if we want to succeed in harnessing it towards climate solutions and meaningful action. I've been really concerned about the tendency to pathologize these feelings of sadness or anxiety as a disorder. That needs to be rejected because framing climate anxiety as a mental illness locates the problem in the individual instead of the social structure. So rather than thinking of it as a dysfunction, I encourage my students and other activists to understand their eco-anxiety as a moral emotion. I even suggested that we might think of climate anxiety as a kind of superpower, as a signal that goes off to tell us something's wrong and needs to be addressed, even while others seem to be sleepwalking through the crisis because their alarm isn't tuned as well. So one thing that I do in my classes is guide students through activities where we talk openly about each of these emotional responses. And as we share something like fear or anger or grief, we listen with compassion to each other, but always end by helping the other person recognize those feelings as moral emotions and acknowledge the strength that they can bring to climate work. So I mentioned that grief is a function of love and compassion. We also recognize how anger and outrage arise from a desire for justice. When a person shares something they fear about the future, that shows trust and courage, and a courage to speak openly. Okay, so I think we've just about run out of time here. My last point was going to be about the stories we tell, that we need different stories. But I will go ahead and conclude there. I did include my social media.
Dr. Jennifer Atkinson of the University of Washington on eco-anxiety and climate grief. Our thanks to Dr. Atkinson and to Chairman Forsman for their wisdom and their insights, and thanks to the Washington State Climate Assembly for bringing them to us. One last thought I have before we put this episode of the report to bed. If you or someone you care about has suffered from anxiety, depression, grief, or frustrated anger at this crisis, you are not alone, and you have every right to those feelings. The situation is that dire, the future is that threatened, and this is all the result of human short-sightedness, greed, and perfidy. Have no doubt, if anyone tells you you're overreacting, don't listen. But if those feelings have become an overwhelming burden in your life, if you despair, if your ability to find joy in your daily life and in your relationships is suffering, then you might want to reach out for help. Our regional crisis hotline, the Salish Regional Crisis Hotline, is at 888-910-0416. They can offer you guidance to the help that you might need to deal with the enormity of the crisis you've become aware of. And if you want to reach out to a community of neighbors who share your concern, who share your fear, who share your need to recognize that this is real, then I can send you no farther than the Olympic Climate Action website here on the peninsula. OCA will not be sending you a raft of contribution emails. We aren't going to be hitting you for donations. We don't raise money that way. If you leave contact information with us, one of our climate champions will be in touch with you personally to talk about your needs in this situation, what you need from the climate concern community, and how you can bring your talents, your ability, your willingness to be part of the solution to this overwhelming existential crisis in human affairs. I know. Here I am. So that's it for today, boys and girls. Papa needs to turn in. And this episode is over. Have a beautiful